Once again, good evening and welcome everyone. It's officially 7 p.m. here in Ontario, 8 p.m. I'm told off on Prince Edward Island. My name is Alexander Gates. I'm the Executive Director and Curator of the Canadian Automotive Museum in Oshawa, Ontario. And on behalf of everyone at the museum, I'm glad you're able to join us for our 11th Third Thursday talk as we share Canada's automotive heritage. Now, tonight, we once again have more than 100 participants registered from across Canada, the United States, and beyond. To start, let me cover a few quick technical details. We've been having a few technical details of our own tonight. So for you, we are using the Zoom webinar platform. So as a participant, you are able to see us and the presentation, but all of your cameras and sound are off. So we can't see you. If you're having dinner, watching TV, we won't notice. So you can sit back and relax for the next hour. Now, Demeric Depensier, our special projects coordinator here at the museum, he's going to be monitoring the Q&A throughout the evening. And we're going to cover as many questions as possible following the presentation. So feel free to throw a question out there at any point, and we'll get to them all at the end. If there's something we aren't able to get to, we can certainly follow up with you after the talk with the email address that you used to register. Now, we are recording this talk, so if you want to watch it again, or if you want to share it with someone, it will be uploaded to our YouTube channel next week, and the link is going to be available in our December e-newsletter. Now, following this talk, you're going to get an automated follow-up email through Zoom that's going to have a link to a survey. So your feedback is definitely appreciated. Our Third Thursday Zoom series is going to continue next month. Our next Third Thursday is December 16th. And our very own Demeric Depensier is going to be speaking on electric cars in Canada. You're going to have to wait another month to see more of him. This talk is part of our upcoming 2022 exhibition called Wires to Wheels, Electric Cars of Canada and Beyond. It's a great preview of the research that he's and others have been putting together for this exciting project. I think you'll find it timely and relevant as the future of electric cars in Canada is a hot contemporary topic. I know driving home tonight, CBC was talking about where electric cars are going to be made here in North America and the implications for that for Canada. So a relevant topic, and we're going to be covering those early years from the late 19th century till about the 1920s. Finally, thank you to our title sponsor, Hagerty, in particular, our regional rep, Michael Wilson, and everyone who made a donation to the museum as part of your registration. There are a number of costs that we incur from Zoom and other software programs to run and advertise these events, so I really appreciate your support. It's now my pleasure to introduce our featured speaker this evening. Joining us all the way from PEI virtually is Rudy Croken, who is a retired educator, and he lives in Kensington, Prince Edward Island. He has been had a lifelong interest, I should say, in automobiles, especially those built in the Maritimes. Rudy is a former director of the Prince Edward branch of the National Association of Automobile Clubs of Canada, the NAACC, and currently serves as the president of the Prince Edward Island Antique Car Club, of which he has been a member for a mere 48 years. So he must have started when, I don't know, you were -8 years old. Definitely knows his stuff when it comes to maritime history. In 2017, Croken released his book called Ban the Automobile, Instrument of Death, which is one of my favorite car books that we have in our library now. It's a history of PEI's 12-year ban on the automobile in the early 1900s. I know this is something when we're posting this talk, there's a lot of comments on Facebook and other locations about the famous PEI car ban, and that's the topic we may do at another talk later on. And so he researched that period on the struggle between locals and the government to earn the right to once again drive automobiles. So he's a guy who knows his stuff when it comes to East Coast maritime car history. So Rudy, I really appreciate you joining us tonight, and I will turn it over to you because I know you have some great stories to tell.
Okay, well, thank you very much. First thing I'd like to do, Alex, is to thank you and Demeric and the Canadian Automotive Museum for the opportunity to speak on the Belcourt car and to share some of the automotive history of Prince Edward Island. The history, I guess, of the automobile in Canada can't be really discussed until we do know about Belcourt and the beginning of automotive history in Canada and on Prince Edward Island. The topics that I'm going to cover tonight is the reason I did the research, the sources of information that I have, the information and inaccurate claims about the automobile, when it arrived, and reports of when it was used on the island, and then what happened to it, and a little bit about the 150th anniversary that was held here in Prince Edward Island in 2016. So some of the books that I used were the Reverend J.C. McMillan, The History of the Catholic Church in PEI, 1835 to 1891. The Scientific American, January 1867. The Cars of Canada that was written a number of years ago with a lot of information on the automobile by Baker and Dumont, or Durnford rather. The Motor Age magazine from Chicago. And finally, Reverend J.M. Reardon published a book in 1955 in St. Paul, Minnesota, on the Belcourt. Basically, it was a biography of Belcourt. The other thing I also am using for the information is community lore. And community lore, I define it as community information in the oral tradition that is so ingrained in the history of a community so as to be accepted as fact. Now, first of all, I want to talk a little bit about Belcourt, the man. Back in 2010, rather, I was planning a trip for a coast-to-coast tour here in Prince Edward Island, and I thought I'd look into some automotive history. And when I looked it up, I found information about when the cars were banned here. And I also uncovered a number of things on the Belcourt car that, without any hesitation, realized it was inaccurate. And anyone with at least the rudimentary information on the automobile would see it as inaccurate. So it sort of intrigued me, so I got involved in looking up information on Father Belcourt and his car. Now, Father Belcourt's life was one of service, bringing the faith to Native people, first of all in the Red River District, which is now Manitoba, and then farther south in North Dakota. And then eventually he did get transferred to meet the needs of the parishioners of Rustico and later the Magdalene Islands. And while the purpose of this presentation is to document the story of the first automobile in Canada, Father Belcourt's story is remarkable in terms of his achievement beyond the automobile. On Prince Edward Island, these accomplishments include the establishment of Perry's community center, a library, a number of buildings in the community. He formed a band that was would go to the capital city and win different competitions against the larger city band. He began the farmers bank in Rustico because there was large interest charged to the people of his parish, and it was the precursor to the credit union movement. And he was here on Prince Edward Island from 1859 to 1869, so basically 10 years. He was away for a short time in 1865, and it was during this time that people believed he made contact to buy the car from Elijah Ware in New Jersey. Father Belcourt was very intelligent, very smart man. He could speak English, French, and eventually Chippewa or Ojibwa. And that was one of the reasons he was sent out to the Red River area, was because he could speak English. When he got there, he spent a long time, up to 2 years, studying Chippewa language, and eventually wrote a grammar book and a dictionary for the Chippewa Indians. He formed study groups in his different churches in the West and here on Prince Edward Island, but it was only for teetotalers. If the people were using intoxicants, they weren't welcome. Father Belcourt had great mechanical skills. He was skilled as a blacksmith, a carpenter. He built houses, boats, schools, farm implements, and he also was known for the priest who baptized Louis Riel. As to his personality, he was a very forceful man. He was a man of action and vision. He was self-willed, a willing and tireless worker. He was a man of the people. I guess he would be considered to have one fault, and that was that he was a very poor team player. He always wanted his own way and was determined to have it. And this got him into disagreements with his bishops, his archbishops, his superiors. He also fought with Governor Simpson of the Hudson's Bay Company. And it's these struggles he had getting along with people that ended up getting him moved a number of different times. So to go on then with the part on the car, and I have to point out that Father Belcourt was known for so many things besides the automobile. When I started looking up information on the car, I found many, many errors. And I felt they were the result of either no research or very poor research. And I'll go over a few of those errors just before I get into it. The Atlantic Advocate quoted an article from the Examiner here on Prince Edward Island from July 5th, 1866. Now that's July. And it reported that they'd observed Father Belcourt's carriage in motion and being driven. Well, it didn't arrive on PEI until December of 1866. So there was no such article in the Examiner on the date that the Atlantic Advocate said there was. Another story in The Guardian quotes a man by Bob Davis. He was writing in the New York Sun, and he was heaping praise on Prince Edward Island. In his article, he stated that it is high testimony that a man's worth as a citizen to say that he hails from the Garden Province, Prince Edward Island. And he continues, the fact that in 1866, the first automobile built in any country chugged its way down the main street in Charlottetown. Well, inaccurate again, was not built in PEI. In a further article, The Guardian has an item, and its title is World's First Auto, Rustico PEI. And it is stated that Prince Edward Islanders have achieved distinction in many fields, but the story of Reverend Father Belcourt, parish priest, is perhaps the most surprising of all. He is credited on good authority with having built and demonstrated the world's first automobile. Well, those are pretty outstanding claims, but the unfortunate part is they're not true. there were quotes given from, for example, Father Reardon's book. When I got a hold of Father Reardon's book and looked them up, they didn't even exist. They were not in Father Reardon's book. So anyway, in terms of the title, Father Belcourt's Car Untangled, it was to try and untangle some of that inaccurate information and give the actual story. So just because I guess someone tells you something doesn't necessarily mean it's true, and that's certainly true in these articles. So it is thought that he ordered the car in 1865. In 1866, December the 19th, the following article appeared in the paper, the Charlottetown Herald, and it is on the screen. A single-seated steam wagon passed through the city this week on its way to the owner, the Reverend Mr. Belcourt, Rustico. When we saw it, the wagon was drawn by horses, but it is furnished with a steam engine and can be propelled by steam. It is the first vehicle of the kind introduced into this island. So that's the article in the Charlottetown Herald. Now, also, according to community lore and published in a few local books, it was Moses Gallant of Oysterbed Bridge who was hauling it by his team of horses from Charlottetown to Rustico. In the Scientific American, the month after the car arrived on Prince Edward Island was a sketch or drawing of the Belcourt car and a description of the car, of the vehicle. And again, it was called a steam carriage. And the article is there on the screen. And very primitive, although in the article, they say that it was a appearance of the car was very impressive. Well, I guess maybe at that time it was. So that's the Ware combined steam carriage built by Elijah Ware in Bayonne, New Jersey. There was also a write-up in Vintage Canada, the first volume 1 of Vintage Canada, #1. And it was pointing out some of the highlights of automobile history. And 1866, Rustico PEI, the Reverend George Belcourt appeared in a single-seater steam wagon. Now, it states of his own design and construction, but that again is one of the inaccurate parts. Many of the reports on the Belcourt car, well, they do have some elements of truth, some are also inaccurate. In the Motor Age magazine out of Chicago, the author, he published an article in 1913, and it states that Ware, Elijah Ware, sold his machine to a clergyman down on Prince Edward Island for $300, and it was used for some years. So $300, if you get that converted to today's dollar, that's a large amount of money. Okay. The next section I'll cover is some of the uses that were reported for the vehicle, again in books, in articles, newspapers, and in one affidavit that was sworn. In Reverend Macmillan's book, The History of the Catholic Church in PEI from 1835 to 1891, he talks about its first trip. And I'll read this for you. Its trial trip made on the occasion of a picnic held near the church at Rustico proved to be a dismal failure. It contributed, no doubt, to the amusement and hilarity of those who were present, but it demonstrated beyond all cavil, the utter unfitness of the machine as a means of conveyance. The starting point was near the church, and for a short distance, the machine moved in an orderly and well-behaved fashion. But soon it manifested a spirit of independence, quite independent. I'm sorry, I lost my space here. Quite independent and unusual in mechanical appliances, and put on a burst of speed without let or hindrance on the part of the driver. Presently, it became altogether unmanageable, left the beaten track of its own accord, and finally became entangled in a fence by the wayside, where it came to a sudden and inglorious halt. There's several other versions of this inaugural event. Reverend Reardon, in his book, wrote, "The trial trip awaited with mingled interest and anxiety, which made on the occasion of a tea party held on the grounds on June 24th, 1867. All went well for a time, and hopes of success ran high. But alas, the steam-propelled carriage got out of control, left the road, plunged into a fence, and halted." So two appearances in books of its first trial run. Another piece of evidence as to the existence of the vehicle was that Father Belcourt was seen driving it, and in 1940 there was an affidavit taken from a man Jeremiah Peters, and he made an affidavit to say that he witnessed the vehicle. And I'll read the affidavit. "I, Jeremiah Peters of Howland in Prince County, make an oath and say that I was born in Queens County, Prince Edward Island, on the 18th day of April, 1855, as I was advised and verily believe, that I quite distinctly remember seeing the steam carriage operated by Father Belcourt. This would be about the year 1866. The carriage appears to be an ordinary driving carriage, propelled or powered with a small steam engine as the source of motive power. Sworn to me before at O'Leary in Prince County, this 30th day of August. Jerry Peters' signature is next, and then the Justice of the Peace, Arthur J. Matheson. So while there's little information from the time it arrived in 1866 to 1869, there is this affidavit, and Peters also, in an interview with The Guardian, talked about seeing it being driven by his residence in Cavendish and going down, apparently heading toward Charlottetown. So I'll move on again to 1869. On Monday, June 21st, 1869, a notice appeared in the Charlottetown Examiner advertising a tea party to be held by the Catholic Institute in Rustico on the grounds of St. Augustine's Church. And St. Augustine's Church was on an earlier slide. And the money raised was to go to the Catholic Institute Hall. And the notice read, "The new steam carriage will be run through the settlement during the day." And then as a follow-up article, the Examiner gave a report on the party that was held at the St. Augustine's Church. The annual social gathering of the members of the Catholic Institute took place on the 24th of June, as announced. It further stated that from 800 to 900 persons partook, and that in the afternoon, a steam carriage was put in motion, and with great wonder and delight was observed steaming away for half a mile on the road and back again at a fast rate of speed. After which the meeting dispersed in good order, all appearing well pleased with the day's proceedings. Now, the good rate of speed, apparently it could do up to 30 miles an hour. Describing the same event, there was a newspaper out of Moncton, New Brunswick. There was a reporter over from the newspaper, the Moniteur Acadien, and he wrote an article on the celebrations of July, and it appeared in their paper on July 9th, 1869. Now, this is a French newspaper, and he reported that in attending the St. John Baptiste Day celebrations, the feast was great, with great magnificence. It was celebrated with the blessing of the crowd, proceeded to tables, and they were caving in from the weight of exquisitely prepared dishes. Further on, the reporter states, what added a lot to the gathering was a steam engine, a vehicle that our good parish priest had started and did a promenade around the site, concluding that for the editor who sees every day the engines of railway trains, it would not seem strange. But for those in attendance that saw it today, it was a welcome novelty. Now, the reason he's stating it would be a novelty was because the trains had not yet arrived on Prince Edward Island. The train never, Prince Edward Island actually protested against and voted against the train coming to the island. And the train never arrived till the 1870s. So this is why he felt it would be a novelty for the people of Rustico. And in the numbers that they're stating, 800 to 900, that appears to be about the number of people in Father Belcourt's parish. It included not only the Rustico area, but the adjoining area of Hope River. And again, Father Belcourt, in working with his parish, did a lot of things for the people, and some of them were covered in the newspapers, but very little. I had mentioned earlier about the band that he had formed. That created quite a bit of interest, because to go to Charlottetown and win a competition over the big city band was quite an accomplishment. And he's to be recognized for a lot of that in the community. Now, I'll go on to when Father Belcourt left Rustico and the car. There's a number of stories, number of versions of what happened the steam carriage, but some of them are hard to, I guess, prove. There's not much documentation. There's nothing in the newspapers. So most of it is in community stories, and there are a few of them, and it's hard to really determine which one would be the most accurate. So during the summer of 1869, Father Belcourt suffered some serious health issues, and by September, he was ready to retire, and he did so. He retired, and he moved across the pond to New Brunswick. Now, when he did that, he obviously got rid of the automobile. Now, the automobile left his possession between the St. John the Baptiste Day in June and his leaving the island in September. The date is not documented, as I mentioned, but it's safe to assume that it left his possession in probably September 1869. In the 1913 book, I give it great credence in terms of its reliability, because it was written, it was the first book written that really mentioned the Belcourt car. And I think it's fairly reliable information, because I don't think it was tainted by the inaccuracies that resulted in later editions of the Examiner, the Guardian, and so on. So the information that Father McMillan published, I think, is pretty accurate. Now, the Reardon book, it wasn't published till 1955 in St. Paul's, Minnesota. And it did deal somewhat with the automobile, but mostly his work in the field of Christianity and Catholicism. Now, in 55, the Reverend Reardon, in his book, he said the car was sold to a friend, Charles McGregor of New Glasgow, Prince Edward Island. And he said McGregor found use for the engine in his carriage shop. Now, others say that another version is that he used it with his windmill in thrashing and in sawing. There's another version in Durnford and Batchelor's book, The Cars of Canada. It had a different outcome for the car. It stated that Belcourt lost interest in it and that the car was reportedly dismantled and that the power plant was removed from the carriage and brought over to Nova Scotia, to Pictou, Nova Scotia, where it was put in a small tug. But proving to be too small, it was then used to run a thrashing machine before it was scrapped. Now, whether that's true again, I'm not sure. I haven't been able to find information to document that. And it was not footnoted in Cars of Canada. Another version was that it was just left sitting there for no good reason other than no one was using it. And eventually it got crushed in a drive to collect metal during the war effort in the First World War. But I think, in my opinion, the explanations as to what happened to the Belcourt car are pure speculation. I believe he got rid of it as he was retiring and moving to New Brunswick, but other than that, it's not documented. And if I was to pick one of them, I would think maybe it was sold to his friend McGregor to be used in his operation. Now, the next part deals with Father Belcourt leaving and going to New Brunswick. He had a farm, a piece of land over there, and he spent a year or so in New Brunswick. And he was then called back to a parish in the Magdalene Islands. And he was up in the Magdalene Islands for about a year and a half, and took ill again and came back to Shediac, New Brunswick, where he died. He died on May 31st, 1874. So he was a man of 71 years old. And he was buried in Memramcook, New Brunswick. And in the Cars of Canada, there's an article or a statement that stated that he was honored in North Dakota. In North Dakota, when he served the people after he left, and for years after, wrote that of all the missionary priests that worked in their country, Father Belcourt was the most satisfactory. He did more for the people. They sang his praises at every opportunity. So in Cars of Canada, they said, while in North Dakota, he is honored with a monument, but was buried in Memramcook under a plain iron cross, bearing no hint of his many accomplishments, including being the first Canadian motorist, the first Canadian to buy a car, and the first to import one. Now, it's interesting to note that later on, in the early 1930s, the people of Belcourt, North Dakota, made a request to the family of Father Belcourt to have his remains moved from Memram Cook to Butte St. Paul in North Dakota. This was again because of the esteem that area held Father Belcourt in. And Father Belcourt's descendants, his family, they agreed to have his body moved to North Dakota and reinterred there. However, the Second World War interrupted those plans, and after the war, that plan was not pursued. Another interesting fact on Father Belcourt was that in 1959, the government of Canada designated Belcourt as a National Historic Person. Again, because of his work for his people and his parishes that he worked in. In 2016, at the Farmers Bank in Rustico, the Belcourt car was recognized with a celebration to commemorate the arrival of the first car in Canada. And if you notice there on the screen, this is a certificate issued by the province of Prince Edward Island, recognizing Canada's first automobile owned by Father George's Antoine Belcourt. And it states that it was shipped from the United States of America to Rustico, and where it was used for a number of years. Government of Prince Edward Island proudly salute this pioneer of Canadian transportation. There was also recognition by the National Association of Automobile Clubs of Canada, the NAACC, and it states that the NAACC is pleased to recognize the Belcourt automobile as the first automobile owned and imported to British North America / Canada. In December 1866, Reverend Father George Antoine Belcourt of Rustico, Prince Edward Island, imported a steam carriage from the United States of America. This automobile was manufactured by Elijah Ware in Bayonne, New Jersey. The NAAC takes this opportunity to recognize this as a significant historical event in the transportation history of Canada. And it is signed by John Carlson, the president of the NAACC, on behalf of the board of directors. Just like to give a shout out to any of you who might be members of the NAACC and the great work that they do preserving automobile heritage in Canada. Another recognition was given by the Prince Edward Island Antique Car Club. In the picture there on your screen, that is myself on the right, presenting that plaque on behalf of the Prince Edward Island Antique Car Club. On the left is the Wilfred Mose, who does a lot of work with the Prince Edward Island Antique Car Club. He is our director on the NAACC, and he made the presentation on behalf of the president, John Carlson. The next is Arnold Smith of the Farmers Bank Museum. That's Father Belcourt in the background. And then the lady is the Honorable Paula Bigger, who made the presentation. She was the Minister of Transportation here on Prince Edward Island at the time. At that meeting, where that picture was taken and where we celebrated the 150th anniversary, Minister Bigger mentioned to me that that might be a good idea for a plate for the automobiles that are registered under the Prince Edward Island Antique Car Club. And I agreed and brought it to our car club, and it was agreed and voted on by the PEI Antique Car Club to go ahead with that. So we met with the minister and the representatives, And on May 29th, they issued this press release. Antique car plates commemorate Canada's first car. Now I don't have the, okay, I'm sorry, it's back now. Thank you. Canada's first automobile, brought to Rustico in 1866, is commemorated in the redesigned PEI antique auto plates. Transportation, Infrastructure and Industry Minister Paula Bigger met members of the Prince Edward Island Antique Car Club to unveil a plate that marks the fact that Canada's first automobile was owned and operated on Prince Edward Island. Father George Antoine Belcourt, a pioneer priest in the Rustico area, was Canada's first car owner, said Minister Bigger. And so the next picture that we're going to see is the plate that we adopted in 16. No, I'm sorry, I'll correct that, 17, the next summer. So it has Prince Edward Island, and this is an antique plate for antique car vehicles only. And you'll notice in the right-hand corner, no expiry, because our antique plates do not expire. They stay on the vehicle. And down at the bottom, or in the middle, first of all, the Ware steam carriage. And then at the bottom, Canada's first automobile. This plate is similar to the one that we run on Prince Edward Island for everyday vehicles, but obviously was altered in some way to, it still has the flags and the maple leaves, but to include the Ware steam carriage picture and the information on the Ware car being the first automobile. Okay, so the last thing that I want to go over is over the last, 3 months, I guess it is, I've been in contact with Arnold Smith of the Farmers Bank Museum. And Arnold has also been in contact with Wilfred Bose, who is our regional rep on the NAACC. And the Farmers Bank Museum is exploring the idea of doing a reproduction of a tribute vehicle recognizing this historic event. And while plans for the vehicle have not been found, they have been successful in finding the patent for the transmission. It has been located. And I suppose using that, as well as the engraving, which is on the screen, or the picture in or the sketch drawing that's in the Scientific American in January of 1867, will be probably the starting point to make that or to build that tribute vehicle. And that basically is my presentation. And does anything, people you've mentioned at the beginning, if you have questions that have come in, I'll try and answer them.
Absolutely, Rudy. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Rudy.
Okay.
As always, everybody, if you have questions, write them in the Q&A box at the top or bottom of your screen, and we will answer them. But we've got a few coming in.
Can I just start off quickly, Demeric? I have a first question I want to jump in with. Can we just go back to the engraving for a moment? I think a lot of people are going to be interested in sort of a quick overview of how this thing would have run.
I did.
What exactly are you looking at as the pieces and parts on this thing?
Yeah, well, in the picture, the article from the Scientific American from January 1867, it does have an explanation of some of the parts in that article and how it runs. And it also, but one of the interesting things that I noticed in it was the brake. The brake is simply a pad that you pull a lever on, and it goes up against the wheel, much like when I was a child, some of the horse and wagons had a brake that simply had a rubber or a wooden pad that went against the tire to stop it. And that's about all they have on this thing for brakes. Now, that's probably why they lost control of it on the trial run. And I also know that from reading a bit on the Henry Seth Taylor car, that was one of his big problems, was the braking. But it's chain driven and a pretty simple, looks like a simple vehicle. But for anyone that's interested in that article, Demerit, you have the that slide or that article on the Scientific American.
We also have the full original document. If anybody would like to see that, drop us an email and we can happily send that off to you. I believe it can be found. I think it's public domain online, but yeah. I'll go back to the, there we go.
Yeah, that article there. And if you could, it doesn't give all of the information, but it certainly it gives quite a bit. And it tells that it can be used for a number of purposes. And of course, one of them is the fact that it can be used for transportation.
Yeah, and I believe the full article, again, we had to trim it down just to fit in the slideshow, but I think the full article has an operating diagram of at least the boiler.
Okay.
And controls of the steam engine itself, if not the car. But yeah, if anybody's interested, we have a contact link on our last slide.
Okay.
So send us an email and I'll be happy to distribute that page from Scientific American as needed.
Yeah. And it said it could be used for thrashing or different purposes. And that may be why McGregor, his friend, might have ended up with the car. It says it is a complete engine in itself, capable of doing the work of the portable stationary engine, can also be adapted to locomotion. So, but yeah, if they can get that information from you, that would be great. It's close by, Alex.
So some other questions coming in. Jeff would like to know if we have any sense of what motivated Father Belcourt to buy an automobile, given that it must have been a pretty expensive purchase. You mentioned $300, and that, yeah, in 1860s money, that is a small fortune. Yeah.
Well, that $300 was quoted in the Chicago magazine. That was the only place I found, but it would be probably thousands in today's dollars. The only thing I found in the literature was that Father Belcourt thought it would be useful in serving his parishioners, and really didn't find out anything other than that. It said that when he was away for 6 or 8 months in 1865, and it's believed that may be the time. According to Reverend Macmillan, who wrote the book in 1913 with information about his car, they felt that was when he made arrangements to buy the vehicle. And it came from United States by ship into Charlottetown and then out to Rustico. But no, I really can't give a definitive answer of why that was the case. But that's someone speculated that that's why he wanted to buy it.
So 2 questions that I'm going to merge together. Another one from Jeff and one from Clark. Do we know how many other steam carriages were built, and are there any other survivors anywhere?
Well, I'm not sure of that. For that, Wilfred Mose with our car club made an effort to contact authorities in Bayonne, New Jersey, to try to find out that very information. But we really were unsuccessful in getting that information. Now, we also contacted Steam Engine Vehicle Museum in Dallas, Texas, and we're not able to get any useful information from them either. So
another mystery yet to be untangled, I guess.
Well, as Wilfred said to me, he believes it's going to take a trip to New Jersey to ferret out that information. So
Another question: is there any evidence, just given the date range when this thing was being used, even the slightest possibility it was around in the same area as the famous meeting of the Fathers of Confederation in 1867? Was it possible Belcourt had taken a drive into town on the 1st of July of 67?
That would be a great story, but no, there's no evidence of that. And one of the surprising things, Demeric, I found in doing the research was that there was not more written in the newspapers of the day on the use of the vehicle, because obviously it would be an amazing thing for these people to see. And I know in the interview that Peters did, he said that when it was going down the road, it was terrifying the cows and horses in the fields because it was so noisy. But the museum in Rustico, the people there, they did a lot of searching through newspapers of the day, and there were a number of them. But there's very little to be found other than the reports of it appearing at the St. John Baptist Day in June. So different, you know. But a lot of the time, I know I did some research on another vehicle, and I researched many sources, but hardly ever found it. I didn't find any information on when the car was used, where it was driven. And again, that's from the late 1800s, early 1900s. So, yeah.
Ron would like to know if you have any conception of, I know the construction of a replica is still not even on the drawing board yet, we're in the early stages, but where it would be likely to be displayed if and when it is built.
It will be displayed at the Farmers Bank Museum. They're heading up the project, and they will, if and when it is built, that will be the home of the Belcourt car. And Arnold Smith has mentioned to me that it would be taken to different events, but its primarily location will be there at the museum.
We'll have to go and see it if it comes together.
Well, yeah, and my opinion is that's the proper place for it.
Yeah, absolutely. Sorry, I'm a little distracted. Joan, thank you, Joan, has found a link on archive.org to the article in question. So I'm just posting it in the chat for everybody to see. This is the Scientific American page we're looking for, and this, yeah, and that I believe has some secondary later page for the follow-up stuff. Oh, you may be witnessing my screen sharing here. Sorry. Yes, that is indeed the article in question. So if you want to know more,
that the link works.
Yes, sorry. If you'd like to know more, we have the original. Thank you very much, Joan. Oh yeah, and a question from Robert about the affidavit. Do you know what's the reason for that signed affidavit and witnessing of the car? You said it happened in the 1940s. Do you know what the context was for somebody making a signed statement that they'd seen the car?
I think it was probably motivated by a group that were trying to get the area designated as a national park or recognized as a designated heritage site. And they were trying to get that kind of evidence in place. And by this time, Jerry Peters would have been like in his 80s, if I'm doing the math right. And he said that it was probably around 1866. Well, it would have been 1867, but trying to think back 70 some years and trying to be accurate, I guess if you could come within a year, that would probably be close enough, but it would have been 1867 to 1869.
As an interesting aside, Andrew has done some of our math for us. give or take $300 in 1865, 1866 would be equivalent to somewhere in the area of $700,000 today. So if Belcourt did buy that car, he spent a lot of money on it. That raises even more questions, but says a lot about the value of the vehicle, clearly.
Yeah. And when he was working in the Red River area among the Métis and the native Chippewa group, he wrote to his archbishop in Quebec and complained that they only gave him $200 for 2 years. And from that, he had to buy supplies for the church and for his schools, and that only for his carpentry skills, he would have been, he was starved to death because he was getting money for some of the work he was doing for the people. So $300 is huge. It was, no question.
Let me see here.
Okay, I think we just have time for 1 or 2 more questions, and then we'll wrap it up.
Yeah. Clark is speculating if, given that Father Belcourt clearly had some degree of technical skills. I mean, you mentioned carpentry and I believe some blacksmithing earlier, whether that might somehow be the origin of the miscommunication that he built the car, or perhaps that he had tinkered with it in some way to cause this sort of legend of him having built this steam car to enter the public consciousness. Who knows? But it's
Well, that makes sense to me because he was a very skilled carpenter, joiner, blacksmith. And that might have been someone putting 2 and 2 together and getting 5, and decided that he must have built the car himself. But there is evidence to the contrary. He did not build that car.
absolutely.
Well, thank you again so much, Rudy, for joining us this evening. I see we're right on 8 o'clock here on my clock. So I will wish everyone a good evening. If you have any further questions, we can certainly forward them along to Rudy, get them answered. These are always great times for us to learn more as well. And I think we're going to get Rudy to come back and talk on that famous ban of that instrument of death, the automobile, at some point, perhaps in 2022. We won't go back to back on PEI stories, but I know that is amongst one of the most famous stories in Canadian automotive history, something that was done in PEI and definitely not done in Ontario. And there's lots of misinformation about that as well that we'll have to clear up. So Rudy, if you will join us again, we'll have you back to talk about some more East Coast history in the future. And yeah, if you guys have any feedback, we will be sending out that survey, and we hope you can join us in December when Dumeric is going to be talking about going back again to the 19th century to talk about the earliest electric cars as well. So we've had Ron Foss talking about the first 19th century internal combustion engine car. Now we've heard about the steam engine, and we'll hear about the first electric car in Canada. And you'll be experts in these very obscure little stories that we've that our predecessors have spent decades and decades digging up these details. So another story to add to our repertoire here. So thank you, everyone. Thank you so much, Rudy, again for joining us.
And thanks for all you do for automotive heritage.
I appreciate that. So thanks, everyone, and have a good evening. We'll see you in December.